welcome to another Asian Investor live stream. I'm your host, Tom Caffarella. Normally, normally, these live streams are focused exclusively on investing in real estate. This is probably the first one that I've done in a long time that hasn't focused just on investing. And in fact, we're going to focus the majority of our time on the retail side of the business for the mere fact that this MLS settlement that has occurred, I don't know, whatever it was, 2 to 3 weeks ago, could have the potential to have a big impact in our business. And typically, when I do these live streams, I come on myself. Now, you guys know me, you know who I am and what I do. I just want to take a really quick second before we actually go into the topic for today to introduce a couple of my co-hosts here. Jason, why don't you kind of give the listeners a high level background of who you are and what you do, and then Chris, if you can do the same after Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jason Goldfarb. I'm the team lead of the Gold Path Real Estate Group at Cameron Real Estate Group. And I'm also co-owner of Goldweather Investments. I'm an agent investor. I'm from Revere, Massachusetts. Originally, I grew up in the pizza business, and I ate a lot of the profits. It was a tough business. I bumped into real estate. I don't have this big plan like a lot of people. I actually just wanted to get a job where I didn't stink after work. 23 years later, best thing I ever did, I bumped into my first investment deal in my first year. And I'm like, oh, this is easy, punch in the face and all that stuff. But, so that's pretty much a high level overview of what I'm doing. 23 years experience. I've been through a lot. And this right here, I believe, is one of those things that is going to shake up the industry for sure.
And just so everybody has an understanding, if you had to kind of guess, and maybe you know the exact numbers, but if you had to guess, like in the past 2 to 3 years, how many listings have you worked and how many buyer sides have you worked in the past, 2 to 3 years?
I should know my KPIs and numbers like on the back of my head, but dozens, if not hundreds, for sure.
Okay.
One year we were around 100 transactions. One year we were just shy of that. This year we're a little bit lower, but investing got my back, and now more than ever, you got to be an investor.
Cool. And how many sellers do you think that you meet with in a month? Because at the end of the day, when we're going to talk about actually what happened, but of course, we're probably now going to have to give a disclosure that, hey, we're going to sit at the kitchen table with these sellers, give them some sort of disclosure that you're no longer required to offer buyer agent compensation. How many sellers do you meet with in a month, if you had to guess?
Me personally or my team?
Your team.
So we're probably meeting about at least 20 per month.
And the reason I'm saying that is because you and your team, you sit in the living room with a lot of sellers. My team goes on over 100 face-to-face seller appointments per week. So my team is sitting in the living room with over 400 sellers every single month. That we're going to have this conversation about this disclosure. Again, not to fast forward this too much, but now, Chris, can you do the same thing? Intro yourself and what you've been up to and stuff like that.
Yeah, my name's Chris Martin, originally from Lynn. Been in the business for about 15 years. A big chunk of that as a solo agent. I led a team. I'm now the team leader over here at Cameron Prestige. So helping on the recruiting side and agents elevate their business as well. I'm also an agent investor. I own property as well. And yeah, that's kind of the quick rundown of me, high level.
And when you were an agent, were you focused more on the buyer side or the listing side?
Listing side, 100%. I mean, we're talking about the first 5 years of my business. I was probably 90% listings. In fact, the only buyers I worked were a result of my listings, whether it was sellers looking to buy or referrals that happen to come across the table.
All right. So we've got a lot of seller side representation here. Not that we all haven't worked buyers, we all have. And I've worked a ton of buyers in my career, and I have people on my team that work buyers. So we have that perspective as well. But a lot of the perspective of like, what it might look like to have some of these conversations when we actually meet with people face to face. So now I want to give my disclosure. Okay. I typically don't go out and put out any sort of legal disclosure. I don't put out any thought disclosures because typically when I'm talking about real estate investing. When I'm talking about real estate investing, I feel 10 out of 10 confidence in everything that I'm saying because I've done thousands of, over 1,000 investing transactions. I am certainly a real estate investing expert. I would challenge you to find somebody that knows more about residential real estate investing than me. And I say that not to be arrogant or cocky, but to say that the topic today doesn't fall under that for me at all. And in fact, the topic today doesn't fall under the category where anybody is an expert in the entire United States for multiple reasons. For one, this MLS ping settlement happened just a few weeks ago, and it's actually not even finalized yet. So a judge has to approve the final part of that, which we everyone who's told me says it's going to be a formality. But everything that I'm bringing to you today is information that I've gathered from things that have been posted online and people that I trust in the industry. But let's be very clear about this. The impact that this is going to have, we are not going to know at least for 60 to 90 days and potentially longer than that. So I'm going to do my best to give you guys the information that we have. We're going to give you some opinions, but please understand that this is not legal advice. And some of this stuff may change over the course of time. My opinion of this is that how this actually kind of gets rolled out and implemented is probably going to look a little bit different than what people think today. And the impact of it, I believe, is not going to start to even really be felt for probably 3 to 6 months. And it may be part of a bigger shift that happens in our retail real estate business, or it might end up being much ado about nothing. And I would say out of all the people that I talked to, it categories. And I did a post about this on my Facebook page that I actually took down because it became such a combative statement. And what I posted was, what is everybody doing to change their business or to adapt to this MLS ping settlement? And really, people fell into two camps. Camp number one was like, this is going to be a big change to our industry and people are going to have to make big changes. The other camp was like, how dare you even say that this could impact our business? And I want to just say, as my final disclaimer and disclosure, I don't really have like necessarily a horse in this race. Like I was not a part of the settlement. I didn't get it asked whether or not this should happen. My objective here isn't to basically, tell people whether I like it or don't like it, or even to give an opinion on it. But my objective for even hosting this is to make sure that with the different scenarios that can happen, that everybody's prepared that there could be some changes happening. And my biggest recommendation, whether this is much ado about nothing or it becomes a big deal, is the worst thing that I believe that you can do is put your head in the sand and basically pretend like it didn't happen, because there could be changes that are happening. So what actually happened? And again, I'm going to do my best to give you guys what I've heard the facts are. I'll probably screw something up, but to my knowledge, what happened was a few sellers, 2 or 3 sellers in Massachusetts, were part of a class action lawsuit that sued MLS PIN. And I believe they sued MLS PIN for antitrust violations because MLS PIN has always required, even if it's $1, to put some sort of buyer compensation when you list a property for sale in MLS PIN. Now, MLS PIN was pretty much created in order to facilitate buyer agents and seller agents working together. That was, if not the most important purpose, like up there for the purposes of actually making sure that there was cooperation between list agents and buyer agents, and that the compensation was clearly stated. Like up until today, or up until when this law actually changes, what was put in MLS PIN was pretty much gospel, right? Like if you were going to offer out a 2% or 2.5% or 3% commission to the buyer agent, 99% or more of the times, that's what the buyer agent was going to get paid, right? And I think having that there, having it known, that's a really, really good thing. And it makes things easy for people, right? But a few sellers hooked up with an attorney who decided to file a class action lawsuit. So for those who don't know a lot about class action lawsuits, they're very expensive to defend. And a lot of times they end up in a settlement. And a lot of times they end up in a settlement because a lot of times it'll end up costing more to defend than it would be to just settle. Now, the settlement, I believe, was for exactly $3 million or somewhere in the vicinity of $3 million. One big point of this settlement is that half of the money that was settled for is going to future attorney fees to continue class action lawsuits against other parties for the same exact thing. So I've heard people say that, yes, this was just MLS PIN, but it's not going to impact my state or my MLS. That 1.6 or $1.5 million that was settled for is going to continue this. So one thing I can tell you as a fact with class action lawsuits is that attorneys make a lot of money on class action lawsuits, for better, worse, whatever. And so knowing that they won this one is going to create more of this. So this could potentially be the beginning of more of these. Maybe it'll be the end, but it probably is the beginning. Okay. So the $3 million, was paid out by MLS PIN. And another part of it is that when this kind of comes to fruition, the thought is that no longer is a buyer agent, is a seller and a list agent going to be required to put even $1 of compensation into the MLS for a buyer agent. Doesn't mean they won't. Doesn't mean that this is going to automatically change and everyone's going to put 0 for buyer agent compensation. It's just that now you have the ability to put a 0 in, where before you could put $1 in, but you couldn't put 0. Okay. The second component to this is that every single time that an offer is made where the offer is less than what the property is offered for on the MLS, the compensation paid to the buyer agent is open for renegotiation. So in the past, I don't think in the probably 2,000 transactions I've been involved in, I don't think I was personally a part of any transactions where a buyer agent was paid less than what was offered in the MLS. Myself, okay, just myself, okay. I'm sure there are people here who maybe were buyer agents or maybe were part of transactions where the buyer agent took less. But for myself, I can't think of any time. But now that could be a part of renegotiation. The seller could say, and the list agent could say, the property's listed for $400,000. You're offering $395,000. Well, great. We'll take the $395,000, but the buyer agent has to reduce their commission from 2 to 1%. Okay, so we're putting that on the table. And then the third thing that I'm aware of, again, this is not legal advice, and maybe this won't happen, but this is what I've been told. I've been told that there's now going to be a disclosure statement that you are going to have to present as a listing agent to the seller that basically says, hey, sign here. I have to disclose to you that you no longer have to pay buyer agent compensation. Now, again, people have argued to me over the past few days, because I've talked to probably 50 or so agents about this. People have argued to me that in reality, for the past however many years, you could theoretically write $1 in there and you could post $1 into MLS PIN. But we've never had a case before where there was probably a one-page disclosure that says, hey, by the way, you don't have to pay this, and I have to have a separate, longer conversation about this. Chris and Jason, I know that you guys have studied this to the extent that it can be studied for now. Have I missed anything big over what is involved in the settlement to either of your knowledge?
I mean, the only thing, and you might have actually covered it, was that can be negotiated. So, so yeah, I mean, obviously, you don't have to. Sellers don't have to offer compensation now. They will be signing off on that, whether they do or whether they don't. But also, buyers agents can make an offer on a property that has zero comp, let's say, in the MLS, and negotiate that it's either going to be paid by the seller, a closing cost credit granted by the seller. So I think at the end of the day, not much is really changing, but the perception is going to change huge.
And I think that's where the perception is the thing that perception is a weird thing, because you never know how something's going to be perceived, right? You don't know. I think the biggest argument to be had in all of this, at least from my understanding, is what the perception is going to be when this actually happens. Is the perception going to be when you go into a seller's living room and you say, hey, sign this disclosure. You no longer have to pay a buyer agent. I suggest you do, but you don't have to. Is the perception from the seller going to be, oh, well, Mr. Agent, I trust Mr. and Mrs. Agent, Miss Agent, whatever. I trust what you're doing. I'm going to pay out this money. Or is the perception going to be, oh, I don't have to pay this. I don't want to. And I'm sure one thing I am confident on is that if you line up 100 people, 100 random sellers, their perceptions are not all going to be the same. There is a 0% probability if you line up 100, 1,000 sellers and you give them that disclosure, I can guarantee that you're not going to get 100 or 1,000 people that all think the same exact thing, right? Some people are absolutely going to be given that disclosure and be jumping up and down and be like, man, I never thought I should have to pay a buyer agent anyways. And some people are going to be like, well, what do you suggest I do? And they may end up wanting to pay out anyways. Chris, any thoughts on that, or did I miss anything so far?
No, I think what you're saying is right. Like, for me, at least, it really hyper focuses in on this topic for sellers, where it was really just kind of like part of the conversation. Now it's like you have to sit on it for a while, and it breaks it down to really what should be layman's terms of explaining you don't have to pay this commission that you would otherwise offer. I part of the renegotiations of commission, from what I understood, it was on counter offers. So if there's a commission being offered out through MLS, and that's something that the seller agrees to and is being offered by the listing agent, if a buyer agent puts an offer on that property and it's countered, at that point, the seller would have the right to renegotiate the buyer compensation.
Yeah, and this is where, I've heard a couple different things from different people, and this is where, as we're having this conversation, there might be people who are listening that 100% know. If we're saying something that maybe is a bit off or whatever, please comment in. Like, we are sitting here not saying that we're experts on this stuff, because there's definitely going to be a lot of rollout to this. We're doing the best we can with the information that we've been told and how we're interpreting some of the information. So just kind of keep in mind that that we're doing our best to kind of do this, and without having a lot of great information. And at the end of the day, like, the bigger brokerages are going to end up having their entire legal departments like analyzing and creating disclosures and stuff like that. So they're going to do a big job and service for the industry too, as to how this is kind of like rolled out. So John, who just commented, I want to address this now, because this is a lot of kind of like what I've heard from a lot of different people. And I definitely want to address this, because this is like camp number 2. Remember, guys, we have camp number 1 of a group of people that think that this is going to be a big deal to the entire industry. And then we have camp number 2, who's saying exactly what John just commented. And John said, there was no buyer agency when I started. This is the same as sub agency that became an issue back in my time. Wasting brain matter on this. Offer a facilitator compensation. So what would you guys say to that?
So what I would say, Tom, is just like you said, if you're in front of 100 or 1,000 sellers, they're going to have a different take on it. And the agents of today, hundreds or thousands of are going to present this differently when they're face to face with a seller.
Yep.
You know, good or bad, some are gonna choose the path of least resistance and not fight for buyer's comp, and others are gonna fight for buyer's comp. It's gonna be and everything in between.
And I think, not to cut you off, but that is the whole point of this, right? So one thing I know, and I shared this on my Facebook page, and it really created like a lot of negativity, so I took it down, but I'm going to say it here, which is that I've been reached out to by listing heavy agents who have already told me, as soon as this comes into to law or the MLS changes, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to pitch. I'm doing 3% listings. I'm doing 2.5% listings. I'm doing 2% listings. So I want to say this again. Like, a lot of people are going to be mad about this. My objective, I love all you guys. I want you guys to be my friend. I'm delivering a message that isn't me, but this is what I've been told from at least 3 or 4 top listing agents who are listing focused. They've told me, I'm using this as an opportunity to get more listings. I'm going to offer out a 3% commission, a 2% commission, a 2.5% commission. So what could theoretically happen? This is all theory, hasn't happened yet, but you could have a top agent who goes into a living room and says, hey, I need to pay a buyer agent commission. My listing in total is going to cost you 5% or 4%. You could have another agent going in that's a top agent and says, my listing is going to cost me 3% or 2%. You don't need to pay a buyer agent. That could happen. That probably will happen. Okay. So now you have a seller, and a lot of listings, multiple people get interviewed, right? So you're going to have a seller hearing 2 things. Which one do they pick? Some sellers are going to pick, hey, do it for me for 3%, do it for me for 2%. Chris, you're laughing. Why?
I'm laughing because the first thought that came to my mind as a listing agent, because that's how I was in this business and always has been, is like, I would really be able to eat really good off of this industry change, because it would be easy for me to sell a 3% listing. I would be getting paid a lot more per listing as a listing based agent going out, and I would potentially have the buyers handle their fee. I get calls a lot from buyer agents that complain now about not getting 50% of the overall commission and finding that out later on in the deal. How many times has that happened where you're a listing agent, you get 5%, you offer out 2, you keep 3, and buyer agents get pissed at that. However,
Yep.
from the listing perspective, it's like, you go out and you negotiate that commission, you get to dictate how that goes. Now, if they're mad at that, imagine how they're going to be, how those same people are going to be when this goes into effect. It's going to,
And essentially what's happening when and if, and it's going to happen, there are listings that go into MLS with 0 comp for a buyer's agent facilitator. It's basically how buyer's agents today have to handle a buyer going to a for sale by owner or an off-market property, right? Where comp hasn't been established. They have to negotiate that in, right? And that being said, not everyone is going to be able to do that effectively. So
No, I mean, so I can tell you, when I got into the industry, when I got my license in 2005, if you said to me, who would you rather meet with today, a seller or a buyer? I would say buyer all day long. And I'm going to tell you the reason. I would be able to go with every single buyer, meet with them. And I would say, hey, I'm going to do these 50 things for you. And oh, by the way, it's free. Sign here. The reason that matters is because when somebody's paying nothing, okay, again, theoretical argument, again, that people have had with me. Well, the buyer's technically really paying for the buyer agent because they're offering the money and that's getting paid out. Okay, wonderful. Forget about that, though. A buyer is paying $0 out of pocket to hire a buyer agent,
And
right?
that
Well, hold on, though. So I go into a living room. I'm 26 years old. I was 23 years old in 2005, going into a living room and being like, hey, I'm going to do all these things for you. And by the way, it's free. When people hear free, the perception is, well, it's free, so I'm not going to really shop around as much. Let's take that to a listing. Back in 2005, when I had my license, I would go in and I would say, hey, I'm going to do all these things for you. And oh, by the way, I'm going to charge 5 or 6 or 4%. Now someone goes, oh, maybe I should get a second opinion. And that's going to be a potentially much bigger impact, not much bigger, but that could potentially be an impact on this, where like you may have to start negotiating your own percentages, and it may be a little bit harder, right? Who does that benefit? If the buyer always has to pay the buyer agent, they're going to shop more, 100%. And they're going to say, well, guess what? Like, just because my friend is an agent, I may want this other person. If I'm going to pay 2% or 3% or 1%, like I may shop a little bit more. And again, I'm pausing here because I have to give this disclosure. Like, people are commenting. This is a hot, disputed topic. Everything that we're saying is theoretical. How this ends up impacting, we are giving ideas of how it could. I've never been so unconfident about exactly how this is going to impact the industry, but we're talking about potential things. I want to get to some of the questions because I don't want to let them roll forward kind of like too much. Somebody said, can't we just skip listing on the MLS altogether? As the Zillows, Realtors of the world is where most buyers took on anyways. The only way a buyer can see MLS is if we agents put them on auto listings. Thoughts? So really quickly on that. So when you post a house for sale on the MLS, it syndicates to most websites. And that's one of the reasons that you want the property on the MLS. So if you're a listing agent and the way that you want the buyers to see the house is the next open house. I have an open house coming up this Sunday from 10 to 12. As soon as you click that button, it goes on Zillow, Realtor.com, and it syndicates to all these websites. So a buyer in today's world, and this is also like John made a comment about going back to the beginning of his business, but there's a big difference, John, between the day where you got your license in 2023. There's a big difference between the way people find homes since I got my license, right? I got my license in 2005. In 2005, you're right, like getting access to what's on the MLS wasn't that easy. In 2005, Realtor.com just started kind of like aggregating data. Today, you can be on any of these sites and know what's on the MLS. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jay or Chris. Like if you're on, yeah, go ahead.
So even when I started back in like 2001. There was less information available to the general public, right? And there was much more than when even probably John at that point, because years ago, in order to even find out what was for sale, buyers had to go into a real estate office and talk to a real estate agent. That's the only way they could actually get information. Then they started getting, more in the tech age, getting out there. At one time, even, buyer's agent comp wasn't disclosed to the public. And recently, and more in the past few years, now that has been disclosed. So everything is being disclosed, and the function of the real estate agent has changed. It's the information is out there. Now what the consumer needs is expert guidance, right? Mm-hmm. And you, like Tom was saying, if you're paying for it, the perception is you're paying for it. And who pays the commission, right? In a sale, I ask people, agents alike, when you say who pays the commission, some will say it's the buyer. Because if there wasn't a buyer in a sale, there is no commission. Yep. Others say it was the seller. So this comes down to the perception versus reality, right? Is things really, really changing, or how is it going to be perceived? And in my opinion, again, it will get people probably riled up. But I think you're going to see a change because, like Chris said, as a listing agent, I'm going to go in there and eat it up, right? I'm going to go in there and maybe not. I'm not saying me generally, but maybe some agents are going to go in there and say, hey, you don't need to offer comp.
So here's another
Especially
thing.
in the marketplace we're in right now, because how much inventory is available? There is nothing, right? So as markets change, this might be different, but in this current market right now, how important is comp? And this is be a dispute, and people will get red in the face on this. And I'm not trying to get anyone upset here, but it's the reality, and we have to deal with it. And I was in the marketplace when September 11th happened, when the credit crisis happened, and just recently with COVID, and we had to deal with it. And I had clients, people I know that sold like crazy during COVID that wish they didn't, because the perception just a couple, 3 years ago was market's going to crash. So what will actually happen is to be determined, right, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, there's another point I want to make too on that. I think as we're talking about this, like Chris said, I'd eat it up as a listing agent. That's one perspective. And I think there's a lot of people that work with buyers who like this isn't going to be the best thing in the world for them. But one point I want to make to this too is like we are not sitting here even saying that this is good for the industry. We're not even saying that this is a positive, right? We're talking about strategy and stuff like that. I could line up a lot of things that I think could be a negative, right? One negative is that if buyer's comp is reduced and there's less, money to go to buyer agents, then listing agents are going to have to field direct questions from buyers. And one of the main reasons for buyer agency is so that buyers have their own representation, their own person in their corner. And so we're not sitting here saying that this is a good thing. I want to just kind of be clear about that as well. Our objective is to talk about what happened, the things that might happen, and how to prepare yourself. And I can't stress enough that basically saying that there's no probability that anything's going to change is the absolute worst thing that you can do. You can say, I don't think there's going to be a change, or this is how you could adapt to the change. But to say that there's a 0% probability that anything is going to change is probably going to negatively impact your business. And one more point to that is like, there's always changes in businesses, right? And the people who adapt, usually when there's a change, the people who adapt first make a ton of money. And the people who say, no change has happened, I'm going to do everything the same way, usually lose. So there's kind of like a speed to implementation to adaption that always happens in every industry, anytime that there's a change. And Chris is talking about like eating it up. And Chris is coming in with the mindset that everybody should have, which the mindset needs to be, how can I utilize this change to my benefit and make more money for myself, my family, the people I care about? Not like, how can I complain about this and being a negative?
One thing I want to add, Tom, on that is you guys have to understand too, like this to me, I look at as opportunity because I'm a listing-based agent. If I'm a buyer-based agent, I would also look at this as opportunity as well, because this is an opportunity for buyer agents to show that they actually have more value than other buyer agents out there. And if you're confident with that idea and that thought, then you should be able to 100% take full advantage of this just as much as listing agents are taking advantage of it.
And let me just add on to that point quickly, because I said earlier, the reason I hated going on listing appointments in the beginning and I like buyer appointments is because I knew that even though I had no experience, I wasn't good at what I was doing, because what I was offering was free, I was going to be able to obtain that client because people weren't paying. Now, this is going to benefit some of the buyer agents that are really, really good, because you guys are going to get more appointments. So this is going to come off the wrong way, but I'm going to say it anyways. Like the person that doesn't know what they're doing, that's not good at what they're doing, and then they go out, they present, hey, my commission's 2%, 2.5%, 3%. That buyer now is going to think, let me interview somebody else. Who else are they going to interview? They're going to try to find the best person in their market, or somebody that has more experience, or maybe is a little bit better at their job. So it's going to benefit that person. So there's always, anytime there's a rule change, there's always people that it's going to benefit. And it always benefits the prepared, the hardworking, the smart people, which is more or less like what I always focus on. And one more kind of point to that is just like, I think at the end of the day, one thing that this highlights that Jason talked about in the very beginning is how important investing is. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time because we're not even close to being done with this discussion. But I am going to just interject right here and just say, this is yet another reason why you need passive income. You need to invest in real estate. Having your whole income based on sales it's risky, actually. It's risky because at the end of the day, you don't want a rule change to potentially negatively impact your income, right? And if it's all of your income, and let's say you only work with buyers or you're 80% buyer based, and this rule change hurts your income, well, if you have passive income, if you invest on the side, now you're not quite as worried about that, right? So that's why that's just yet another reason to invest. And again, I definitely don't want to spend a lot of time on that because there's questions popping in and stuff like that. Somebody said, either way, I will still offer a buyer's commission. Okay, so here's the problem with that statement. There's a huge problem with that statement, massive problem with the rule. That's like, this is how I interpret the rule. Okay, you're going to have to go into a seller's living room. You're going to have to give them a disclosure saying you don't have to pay a buyer agent. So my question to you, and I can't see whose name it is, my question to you is, when you go into their living room and you say, hey, my listing commission is 3, 4, 5%, whatever, I'm going to offer out to the buyer, and that you give them a disclosure and it says you don't have to pay a buyer agent, and they tell you, I don't want to pay a buyer agent anything, how will you still pay a buyer agent?
And the question is would you not take the listing? Would that person or an individual not take the listing? For a seller says, hey, I will not pay a buyer's agent. You are recommending it as a listing agent, but the seller says, no, then I'm not going to list with you. I'll list with you, but I don't want to offer a buy. Are you not going to take the listing?
Which would be the only choice in this point. There would be no ability. Well, I guess you could theoretically say, hey, I'm charging 4% or 3% for a listing. I'm going to give out 2 to a buyer agent. But if the seller won't sign that document and they don't want to pay a buyer agent, you're not allowed to do it. So it's not that you're going to even have from my understanding of the interpretation, it's not like you can just, moving forward, it won't be that you can just take money out of your own pocket. It's that you would actually have to get authorization. I mean, you always did have to get authorization. You couldn't just offer a buyer agent whatever you felt like. In a listing agreement, at least in Massachusetts, it says on there, here's the commission, here's what I'm going to offer the buyer. That's what the seller signs, right? So that's correct, right? Like Jane, Chris?
Oh,
Yeah.
100%.
I mean,
there's been, over the years, there's been exclusive right listings with variable rates too, where, listing agents could offer a certain amount to the buyer's agent in MLS, but they also had an agreement like, hey, if the buyer came in direct, there could be a variable rate on commissions and whatnot. But this is different because they're actually going to have to sign a disclosure.
Yeah.
It's going to be, because there was a lawsuit, it's going to be very, very base disclosure.
So look, guys, $3 million, they're talking about this being, if there's more settlements, this being one of the smaller ones. So this is not going to be something, this is something that every brokerage, like it's going to be like lead paint, where it's like one of the focus items on every compliance, right? Like this is going to be training galore on like, how do you do this? How do you have the conversation? What form do you need to get signed, right? Like it's not going to be like in the past where you go with the listing agreement and it says the listing amount, and then you're kind of just like, okay, and by the way, we're offering out 2% of that to the buyer, like, and it's a smooth, like no questions kind of conversation typically.
And Tom, I have a question here going to the consumer, right? And Chris, this is to you too. How much do you think the consumer understands the real estate business now, or in the past or now? Like a new buyer comes or a new seller comes in, how much do they really understand how this works, right? And that's another thing on the perception of that, when the reality sets in on the buyer side. Buyers, right now, everyone's been saying, oh, it's included in the sale, the seller pays. Now as a buyer's agent, we're going to have to say, hey, if they don't offer comp, you're going to have to pay the commission. How many buyers maybe decide to not use a buyer's agent? And I think that could be an issue because they don't know what they don't know. And buyer's agency is really great for a buyer for protection, right? And in a real estate transaction, if nothing goes wrong, it's generally okay. But a great real estate agent is like a great insurance policy, right? Because you just don't know what you're going to get into. So whether it be the buyer or the seller.
Well, again, this is where like having a strong opinion on this is impossible to have, because when I look at things, I think about like a sample size of 100 or 1,000 people, and out of 1,000 people, there is a good amount of people in that 1,000 that think I don't need a buyer agent. Like they think in their head, I'm not saying this is right. In fact, I actually think it's wrong. I don't think it's smart to not have a good buyer agent. I think it's actually foolish to not have a good buyer agent. But there is a certain percentage of people in that group of 1,000 that think I do all the work. I'm the one reaching out to my agent to look at houses. My agent didn't respond back to me. This, that, whatever. Like there are people in this group of 1,000 that think that buyer agents are worth zero. This is not me talking.
And the same goes for listing agents too, Tom. They're
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest point. I feel that should be one of the biggest takeaways is my perception, your perception. Everyone has this perception, and you don't have to necessarily agree or disagree with me. Just understand that is a perception that other people have as well in what we're talking about here. So I feel like Tom mentioned something that I wanted to get a quick plug for. I have a pop-up training tomorrow that I have on the calendar that I want to invite everyone to right here at Cameron. We're going to be talking about how to add value and how to really just have this be a part of your buyer consult. So everyone that can hear me out there, feel free to come and join us here at the office at 20 Del Carmine in Wakefield. We're going to do it at 10 a.m. So please come and join us, whether you're an agent with us or not. But what I wanted to just hit on real quick was putting all of your eggs in any basket is risky, like Tom said. But if you think about it specifically to real estate, putting all your eggs in the buyer side is even more risky. So you should have that diversity with the buyer side, the listing side, investing, and all that stuff. But definitely looking forward to tomorrow's training, because we're going to talk more about the strategies and all that good stuff. I just wanted to throw that out there real quick.
Yeah, and I think so far,
like going forward, like this is going to be needed quite a bit, because when this change happens, listing agents, buyer's agents, and even the general public are going to need the information. And it's just, hey, what's going on here? And there's a lot of questions. And right now there's only kind of guesses on what the answers are going to be. We will see when this happens. And what are we looking at? I mean, this could happen and go into effect within the next 30 days, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
I think longer than that, because a judge has to sign off on it, and I think there's a couple other steps. So I think it's what I've been told is it's more like a 60 to 90 day thing for it to come into place. Like I said, I've said this 1,000 times because I want to be clear on this. Like, it could happen tomorrow, and I could end up being wrong, and we're just getting and gathering information. But from what I've been told from multiple people, it's pretty much a guarantee that it's happening, and it's pretty much a guarantee that it's at least 60 days out from today.
Does that mean that we're 60 days or 90 days out to all our MLS fees going up as well?
That
I don't know. I mean, that I can't say.
And Chris, why would that happen?
Return on your investment.
Well, I mean, again, and going into thoughts on what might happen, I mean, there may be that the market's tough. It's always been tough, right? There's been a very small percentage of agents that lead the pack on the buy side and the list side, and this could make things tougher. So you may see many agents leave the business, and MLS subscription service,
depending on who you are, could end up making you more money. And so we've basically focused on the negative, right? So far, I guess, in theory, like a lot of the stuff is at least being interpreted. I'm looking at the comments negatively. I don't look at any rule change or law change like that. I don't. I think the best and the brightest and the hardest working and the most educated and the smartest, they're always going to succeed. So the thing is, you have to put yourself into that bucket. And again, obviously you guys know I've got an agent investor shirt on. I promote investing all the time. Like, this is just yet another wake up call to say, if you're not investing in real estate, join our inner circle, follow our content, ask us for help, like, get involved in investing. Because as much as like this may be a negative for the industry, and it's definitely going to help some people and hurt other people, like every other rule change, right? It's like, to give a sports analogy, right? They move in the 3-point line. All of a sudden, Steph Curry's like the best player in basketball, right? You move the 3-point line, 20 feet back, like the 3-point shot probably doesn't even matter in basketball. When there's a rule change, you can't look at it like, do I like it? Do I not like it? You can have an opinion, but your action needs to be like, how am I going to better myself and my business? I still want to hit some of the questions here. Someone said, Chris, most of the buyers out there are barely hanging on. They're getting down payment assistance, etc. How are they even capable of coming up with any more money? That question is for Chris.
Yeah, I mean, this is something where, it's something we have to think about. Is it something that they ask for seller credits? Is it something that I know agents that are doing this and have been doing it for a while, where they want to make sure that they're guaranteed to get 2.5%. And
Yep.
They're basically putting in their contracts that the buyer would be responsible for the extra 0.5% if they don't get it on the listing side. So, this is stuff that's been done. And again, I think focusing anything too much in one field, if you're only working with FHA buyers, it's probably a problem. If you're only working with a certain group of buyers and clientele, that may be something you have to adjust and maybe work with some more conventional buyers and adjust our strategies on that.
And I think, like, with what you're saying, it brings up a great point. And the reality is, there may be a way, like some people have talked about and theorized, this might be able to be financed, right? So that could, if that happens, and this is why anybody who says they know how this is going to play out exactly is lying, or they're just dumb, to be just blunt, right? If this is able to be financed, we could, let's flip it completely around. We could get into a situation where a 3% buyer agent becomes the norm, right? It could be the norm if, for whatever reason, now you're used to negotiating, right, your compensation, and it can be financed. Maybe 3% becomes the norm. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm flipping it completely around and saying, if it can be financed and you have control and you're dealing with your buyer, because I know, like, we've done a lot of, trainings here on different people. They offer different comp, and like some buyer agents are, only working for 3%, and they're getting that because they're getting what's in the MLS, and then they're asking for more. So it's like, that's another way to kind of like flip it. But to flip it back the other way, there could be buyers, if this can't be financed and it can't be a closing cost credit, there may be buyers who go, Chris, I really want to work with you. You're my best friend, but I just literally can't afford to pay you. And the comp is 0 in the MLS. And I can, oh, by the way, I can see that because it's now public. I'm really sorry. I have to buy that house. That happened to me. This actually happened. It was a close friend of mine. And I found him an off-market deal that was like one of my, my seller off markets. And I put him in touch, and he agreed to pay me a 2% commission. And it was like his dream house. And then for whatever reason, like he couldn't finance it, or something went wrong. He couldn't pay me, and I got 0. And he said, Tom, I'm really sorry. I want to pay you, but I can't. And I made nothing on that sale. I feel good about that sale. Like, he has a nice house, but that was like a $10,000 commission. By the way, I was working with him as a buyer agent, and I was working with him as a buyer agent, and I didn't have to show him that house, right? And this is going to get into another thing, like the steering aspect of this that, like, we haven't even discussed. What are you going to say, Jay?
I don't want to go there, Tom, but I mean, just to piggyback off of this, what we also might see is the lending institution participate and either maybe give some sort of credit towards this, or right now what you had mentioned about getting some seller credit. So now instead of everybody writing in, sometimes you write in, hey, the seller will contribute X amount of dollars towards the buyer's closing costs, prepaids, etc. Now adding into that language buyer's agent compensation as well. And maybe they will increase the amount that you could ask for. Sometimes that's capped at 3 to 5% of the sales price. And maybe the lending institution will allow that to go up a little bit more, seeing as if buyer's agents might be looking for 2 to 3%.
Yeah, I mean, everything's on the table. I mean, there's more loan programs out there than I know of, right? There's all these different down payment assistance programs that are always popping up. I mean, this is going to be an issue that lenders are going to want to adjust to too. And I see it as something that they're going to discuss and, you know, could be on the table where they do offer something as a credit that's not going to impact necessarily as the rest of the loan would, or be applied to the purchase price where it's going to affect the appraisal. So, I mean, everything's on the table here.
And again, we don't know. None of us know.
Well, the other thing too is the other thing to that point where none of us know is like, none of us even know like how this might even evolve. This could start out being like business as usual, you know, for months and months and months, or even like a year. And then like as time goes on, so one thing I would say is what happens if one of these big companies, like a Redfin, goes, you know what? We're just doing straight 1% listings. That's it. We're doing 1% listings. They're a huge company that has a lot of marketing power. They're already advertising 1%, right? But then they go into the living room and they say 1% to us, 2% to the buyer agent or whatever. But now they could actually say it's 1% to us. Okay, so what happens, right? What would happen if a couple of big companies just said this is the angle we're going to take, right? None of us have control over that. Somebody said, I believe this will bring in less offers if an agent sees there's no buyer comp. Okay, so a couple of points to that. We're not saying that this is good. We're not even saying this is good for the seller. We're not saying this is good for the buyer. But it's what the seller wants to do, right? Like the seller may not understand that. Like how many times, Chris or Jay, have you gone into a listing appointment and like you're really trying to help the seller, educate them, whatever. And then they just have an opinion and you can't convince them otherwise, even though you know that what you're saying is actually helping them. How often does that happen?
Oh, it happens all the time, Tom. And even when you have all the data showing like, hey, who I work with, I'm getting typically X amount percentage over list versus the average agent. And typically the percentage less for sale by owners get. And at the end of the day, when you're talking to a seller about the right way to do it and the right way to properly present the property and that first impression, and at the end of the day, the net, what you're saying to me, what sellers want is the most money. And a lot of times they'll be hyper focused on the commission. Yep. When with some agents, they might pay less on the commission, but at the end of the day, they net way, way less than they would have if they went with just another agent who had a superior track record and did a lot more servicing and marketing, etc. Right? I mean, look at McDonald's. They have the best hamburger, but they sell more hamburgers than almost anyone, right? I mean, it's going to come down to who markets the best, who's going to present your property the best. And sometimes sellers don't understand that. You do the best to educate them. You don't have that much time. You're in the living room, you know, over an hour conversation. Many do get it, but many are just focused on that percentage of commission. And no matter what you say.
Let me add another wrinkle into this. What about all the flat fee MLS people? So everybody who does a flat fee MLS, right? Those people are whatever they are, $500 to putting in the MLS. Those people there, as a subset of people, believe that they don't need an agent. Flat fee MLS, that to me, that could be like the first likely and probable shoe to drop. You put your house, you're a flat fee MLS person. Obviously, like, you know, that person wants a discount. They don't believe in paying agents. They think they can do the work themselves. I'm not saying I'm for it. I'm not saying I'm against it. That's their belief. Then they go, oh, by the way, you don't even have to offer a buyer agent commission. And then they think about it and they go, well, it's going to syndicate to every website. I'll deal with every buyer who comes to me anyways. I mean, and then that's going to present a problem. It's going to that's actually going to present a legal and ethical problem to the buyer agent who gets told about that property, and that's going to be a whole other compliance, probably lawsuits that are going to happen because of that as well. But if we just think about like the flat fee MLS people, I know they're not the majority of listings that are in the MLS, but that doesn't even have to do with agents. That's just, flat out like people putting their properties into the MLS for a fee type of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, Tom, I just think at the end of the day, this needed to be done anyway. This is just going to put a magnifying glass on it. Over communication needs to be had on both sides between buyers agents and listing agents with the consumers, really educating them, right? And at the end of the day, right, when we recommend offering comp and a seller wants to offer a low comp, we talk about why you want to offer a higher comp, right? And the benefits and negatives to it, right? Again, the consumer makes the decision. But that being said, to your point, and it's we're in an industry to make money. We obviously have fiduciary responsibilities, but not every agent is going to communicate the right way. And when you're talking about if there's 3 properties on the market, one offering a 3% comp, one offering a 2, and one offering nothing, and they are identical, which one does the buyer's agent show the consumer?
Yeah, that's something that I know a lot of people have that mentality. I think right now it's true, right? If you have a bunch of properties that are on the market and you have some that are offering higher percentages, naturally the buyer agents are going to push towards the higher percentages. However, if the market does change over time, and it's probably not going to happen instantly, but if it does change over time where you have the majority of properties not offering out any commission, then what are you going to do?
Yeah. Somebody said, FYI, and I've heard this too, in commercial listings, we see this more often. The seller agent states that they are not paying a buyer commission and that they need to get paid from the buyer. So I want to just kind of, because somebody I know, a friend of mine actually said that to me, that's in commercial. And what I said back to them, because I think inherent in that comment of like, this is how it's done in commercial, that the inherent part of it is, well, like, okay, well, buyers will just start paying the buyer commission. Look, there's a big, big, big difference between somebody who's in the market for a commercial property that has money to somebody who just saved up the exact amount of money for a down payment and doesn't have any more money. There is a big difference between those two people.
Oh, the emotions are completely different, Tom, as well.
The loans are different, but even the person, right?
I mean, the emotions, right?
Oh, the emotions. Oh, yeah, the emotions are totally different.
Yeah,
because if I'm out there trying to buy a commercial property, I'm going, what are my numbers? Does this make sense? Even with my own house, not the case, right? Like I didn't make a good, smart financial decision when I bought my house. I didn't.
but you love the house.
I love the house. So, I went 41 over asking on a house that probably had no other offers. And I'm pretty confident there were no other offers. But that's just what happens. Yeah, somebody said, does anyone worry if a seller agent doesn't offer buyer agent commission and it impacting if buyer agents will therefore not show the property? So this is another argument that I had. And I do feel strongly about. I'm going to ask Chris, I'm going to ask Jay. Who's the one driving what houses they see? The agent or the buyer?
Buyer.
All day long. This is not disputable. I've heard people say this. It's actually a ridiculous thing in 2023. With rare exception, it is the person that's looking online every day. They're waking up, they're checking it, they're excited, they're looking to buy a house, and they're going, I want to see this property, that property, and that property. That actually was not the case when I started. In 2005, I remember printing out MLS listings, going and being like, there's this one, there's this one, there's this one, let's talk about it. Like, I'm not saying that doesn't happen in all in 2023, but in general, it's the buyer that's dictating. Like, I saw this property. I drove by the property. I want this property. I already did all my homework. Like, I'm ready to do this. I mean, Jay, have you had a buyer in the last like year or two where like you were driving the bus mainly?
I mean, at the end of the day, I'm looking to satisfy their needs, right? So for the most part, they're the ones telling me what they want to see, and I'm guiding them. And even they're on my website, but they're on Zillow, they're on Redfin, they're on they're getting notifications. So at the end of the day, they're going to want to see what they want to see.
Yeah, I mean, this is the game has evolved a lot since we all started in the business. I mean, we cannot hold our buyers within a box. I mean, it's smart to train our buyers on how to act and encourage them if they're going to be looking on these other websites on what to do and make sure they're contacting you. But they are looking. They're not just looking at your feed that you're setting them up with. They're looking at other stuff. I have not had a situation, I think, ever, maybe one that I can think of, that I handed them a property that they actually put an offer and purchased.
Somebody said listing agent's job is to educate the seller on why it is in their best interest to offer a buyer agent commission. And I think that, we've talked about this a couple times where whether or not that is in their best interest or not, we've talked already about the fact that like our job is to advise our clients to do what makes the most sense for them to achieve their goals. That does not mean they're going to listen. That does not mean they're going to listen. And they may listen. Different people are different, right? Again, that's why I say, like, when we have this conversation, I'm thinking about this in the group of 1,000 people. You explain why it's in someone's best interest for 1,000 people, and you give them all the reasons in the world. A certain percentage of those 1,000 people are going to go, yeah, but I don't agree with you. It's my house. This is what I want to do. So you can definitely have that conversation. It doesn't mean that they're going to do it. It's their property, right? They have the underlying kind of thing. Somebody said
and when you have 100 people and the percentages, usually you have 10% on this side that's extreme, 10% on this side, and then you have the 80% in the middle that's kind of leaning one way or the other. But at the end of the day, like you said, Tom, I mean, we're there to guide and educate. The consumer's making the decisions, right? So you educate. I go to the doctor. The doctor tells me I shouldn't eat certain things. And sometimes, he's a professional. Sometimes I, exercise and diet, right? And we can get professional guidance in many different fields, including real estate. But it's up to the consumer to listen and take care of themselves, right? They have to get the best education they possibly can. If I'm going to buy something I've never bought before, like a big ticket item, I'm going to try to get educated, right? I mean, but how is everyone going to go about this? And I think at the end of the day, we spent a whole hour here talking about this, and the jury is still going to be out.
Yep.
And there's going to be a lot more conversation about this in the near future, coming up in the next few weeks for sure.
And the crazy thing is, legitimately, I have about like 2 more pages of notes of stuff I planned on talking about. And there are so many more questions and comments in here. And that's the crazy part, is like, we could probably keep going like on and on and on. Obviously, we've kind of given our opinions. Our opinions are not legal facts, and the legal facts haven't even come out yet. We don't even know what this is going to look like. But I think, like, just to kind of like, bring this back to the basics. The basics are that we do not control the laws of the United States. We don't even control the laws of the rules of what's in MLS PIN or any other MLS. We are just licensed professionals that have to do what the rules are. We have to follow the rules. We have to follow the regulations, and we have to act in the best interest of our clients. And we have to do all of that within the box of, we still have to earn a living so that we can stay in business, feed our family, live our dreams and goals and desires and all that good stuff. And none of this stuff was to scare anybody at all. Like, if it scared anybody or if it sounds scary, it wasn't meant to be. Like, I would say 95% of all of the live streams I do is all about like how great your life can be in the future with all of these changes, and happy and merry and all that good stuff. But I don't want to, and I knew, like, when I read down these comments right now, like the vast majority of them are negative and they're angry. And like I knew that this was going to happen because I had this already happen on my Facebook page. I could have just skipped it over. It would have been easier for me to be like, hey, this is a controversial topic. People are, upset and they're, not happy. And ultimately, like, I almost feel like I said this to somebody last night. I said, I almost feel like, it's like, don't shoot the messenger. Like, I feel like some people have like literally come at me as though I made this rule change. But I feel the obligation to talk about this because I do think that at the end of the day, whether, somebody's getting mad at me for presenting information that I'm just parroting back information that I've learned. I think it's important and it's my duty for people that listen to what we talk about to understand that this could be anything from a very minor impact to a very major impact. And it really just goes back to like two things. Number one, if I'm an agent, I'm investing and I'm building a listing-based business. Those are the two things that I come away with from this conversation. And I go, I am never going to take a risk with my livelihood, knowing that this impact could be big. Even if you think that the probability of this being big is small, I'm not even taking that risk, right? So I'm going to focus, I'm going to build a seller-based business. Every single person who's on here who is in the inner circle has the ability to partner with us on deals. So this makes a listing-based business look a lot better for two reasons. First of all, buyer agent comp could potentially net overall go down, potentially. But in addition to that, listing agent commission could potentially on average go up. But then all of you have the potential, if you're in the inner circle and you find a great deal, to partner with us. So we have an agent that we're partnering on a deal right now. We're going to make six figures. They're going to make six figures. Now, this person, all that they were doing was focus on building their listing-based business. They weren't even going after an investment deal. They came across one because they met with a seller that's in their sphere of influence. They presented the deal to us, and now they're going to make six figures. So I think if we're focused on the right things always, and we're working hard and we're working towards stuff that makes the most financial sense for us, and we're acting in the best interest of our clients, and we're following the rules, like there's always opportunity here. But I'm going to say one last thing on it. Like, there's a reason I have a saying: sales will make you a living, investing will make you wealthy. It's a fact. Sales will make you a living. It can make you a living. It can make you a good living. It can make you a squeak by living. But investing will make you wealthy. And if this isn't kind of like a wake-up call to say, oh, maybe I should start thinking about investing in real estate, like, I don't know what is. I really don't.
Yeah, and to your point, Tom, about your story with your friend there, where you helped them out and didn't get paid. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of agents don't need to do a lot of deals. Losing just one deal that you would have had that goes away can be a big difference in your yearly income. So, I mean, at the end of the day, buyer's agents are really going to have to bring massive value, and it still can be done. And I tell you right now, there's going to be some buyer's agents that absolutely thrive.
And I just want to, I believe in what Tom said in building a listing-based business now more than ever. For those agents that do heavily focus on buyers or have buyers, another plug for the training tomorrow here at Cameron, really just talking about how to strengthen those buyer consults, how to add additional value as a buyer agent. Everyone that's listening to me can join us here at the office right on 20 Del Carmine Street in Wakefield tomorrow. We'll be happy to have you.
Yeah, and the bottom line is it's great to just have multiple streams of income as an agent.
Tomorrow, we'll be happy to have you.
We'll all figure it out.
Yeah. And there'll be like, today was really, I think today most likely is going to be the beginning phase of this conversation, meaning that there is what we know today. There's going to be what we know in 30 to 60 days, but there is likely going to be a lot of strategic things that need to be done over the course of time. Whether it's like how you structure your buyer agreement, like all this stuff, compliance and, strategic. so today wasn't meant to, it's hard to give a full strategic, conversation when we don't know exactly how this stuff is going to be impacted, other than to say, invest in real estate, start to focus some efforts on getting face-to-face seller appointments. You guys know, if you're in the inner circle, we'll go on those face-to-face seller appointments with you, help you get, those deals and all that good stuff. So just, again, keep a positive mindset. To wrap, like, keep a positive mindset. This, like I said, this could be, impactful, but it doesn't mean it has to be a bad thing for you. This could be the push that you needed to start investing in real estate. This could be the push that you needed to start listing, working more on listings. But do nothing. Do not put your head in the sand unless you're willing to accept that your income and your livelihood could be impacted. If you're okay with that, if you're already, in a great financial position and you're just like, hey, who cares? Like, I'm fine. That's cool. But don't put your head in the sand and pretend like this stuff, may not have an impact.
I couldn't agree more, Tom. And even just 2 to 3 years ago, the market is completely different. You have to adjust. You have to always be changing. I mean, we're coming from just 3 years ago, a below 4%, lending rate that was available. Now we're at around 7. Things are going to change, and this is just one of them, right? There's going to be other things that change in the future. Mm-hmm. So always looking to adjust and improve, and just really make the best outcome you can do for yourselves, right? And just educate. And that's the thing. That's what we're trying to do here, all of us, right? Is just really learn and educate and adjust to the best we can for ourselves and our family and our inner circles as well. So
diversify, like the sales is, hopefully just a part of your business, right? And the investing can really be the game-changing stuff. So I'm looking at it as a positive thing and motivation more than anything. So I'm looking forward to it in a weird way.
Yeah, change can be good. I mean, again, it can be a good thing for everybody. So Chris and Jay, thank you for jumping on. And, like I said, I'm sure that, during this presentation, there's probably some stuff that we said that maybe we got misinformed on or whatnot. And as we become more clear on exactly how this is going to happen, how it's going to get rolled out, and the strategies that make the most sense to help you guys and your families, we're going to be teaching and training more on that. So, keep tuning in and keep listening to the podcast and all the stuff like that. So,
and Tom, just end it, since you upset a lot of people, maybe sub 2 will take off now.
Oh man. I just think
we have to get Tom a little riled up, since he's riled everyone else up.
No, you know what though? Here's the thing. Like, when I posted about this, like, I didn't even post my opinion. I just said, hey, MLS settlement, like, how are you thinking it's going to impact your business? And I just got destroyed for like 500 comments, and I deleted it. And you guys want to hear something funny? Yeah, this actually is really funny. And I took it down, not because I felt like, I didn't feel bad about myself. I was just like, oh my God, I'm actually making people angry by having this post up. But somebody reached out to me after the fact, after I took it down, and they commented on another one of my posts. And they said, Tom, why'd you take that post down? You didn't like the responses you were getting, did you? And I'm just like thinking in my head, like,
do you regret taking it down, Tom? Should you have kept it up?
Well, look, like, I'm not in the business, and I said this to somebody yesterday, like, I'm not in the business of making people mad at me. Like, that doesn't help me at all. And that was my concern, frankly, about even doing this. I'm like, I probably, what it kind of like felt like? It felt like, people say, oh, don't ever talk about politics. That's what it felt like. It felt like there were two sides, and like neither side could even see the other one's like point. And one side was thinking this way, one side was thinking the other way. And it was just like, I just felt like there's no way I can win on this. Mm-hmm. But I still think like I'm going to go with my gut, which says, if this is an important topic that we can potentially help people with, I'm going to do it, even if I get like destroyed in the process. So,
yeah, no, I think it's very helpful, and I appreciate you bringing it out there and having us on to discuss it, because I'm probably going to get some of this too. But at the end of the day, you have to deal with what you have to deal with. This is the reality. This change is coming. We can't stop it. We didn't implement it. We didn't ask for it, but we have to, live with it and adjust with it and go from there.
Yeah. So, all right, guys. Thank you again. I appreciate you coming
Thanks.
on.